Yeah, maybe everybody's got one now. Got two papers in there. The first is just an outline of what we'll be doing this quarter. Cover the book of Genesis. Lays out what we cover in each class. And all I ask you to do ahead of time is read the chapter. So flip down through there and you tell what chapters we cover each time. So if you'll read those chapters 2 or 3 times before you come to class, I'll help out a lot. We'll go through it there. Those who have been in my classes before, have a handout almost every class. So I'll give you something at the end of the class. We'll talk about that more later on. So this morning, get into it, and we'll talk about Genesis a bit later. This morning, those who were in here the last 3 classes that Tim did, I'm going to kind of do a little repeat. Sorry about that, but when I taught Genesis before, this is always my first class to go through the 17 periods. And have some in here who were not here the last 3 class periods. So we'll go through these again this morning. The blank piece of paper in there that's got 17. What I would suggest you do is as we go through it, write what you can down there. This helps reinforce what's on the screen. We'll go pretty fast. We've got to cover up the entire Bible period this morning. So don't worry about neatness. Scribble it in there. Get what you can done. So that'll be our class this morning. Let's cover the 17 periods. Then we'll start with Genesis 1 on Wednesday night. Okay, periods of Bible history. Talk about these 17 periods of Bible history. Nothing magic about the number 17. Could have been 12 periods or 20 periods or whatever, but we got it divided into 17 periods. Let's talk about those this morning. All right, first period is before the flood. What happened in the period before the flood? Let's go through it right quick. Genesis chapter 1 covers the creation. Genesis chapter 2, Adam and Eve in the garden. We're going just the highlights this morning. So, creation chapter 1, Adam and Eve in the garden in chapter 2. And we don't know for sure where the Garden of Eden was, but here's a map. And if you see the Tigris and Euphrates rivers on there, then down through here, this is the supposed place where it could be, down right above the Persian Gulf, because of the river names that are there. So don't get hung up on that's where it is, but it's a possibility where it may be. While we're here, look at this little bitty lake right up to the top. Keep in mind where that is. We'll come back to it in just a minute. Okay. All right, back to Genesis before the flood, chapter 3 is the first sin. When Satan deceived Eve, he gave to Adam. It's also the first one of those gotta-know verses. Genesis 3:15 is one of those gotta-know-it type things. The first promise of the seed, Christ coming through the seed of woman. That point. Then Genesis chapter 4 is the story of Cain and Abel. And Genesis 5 are the generations to get you from Adam down to Noah. That's all before the period before the flood. Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of Genesis. Most everybody knows what's in those chapters. All right. Moving to the second period, be the flood. Genesis chapter 6, we see the wickedness of the world. Man had got so wicked, God, which he had never made man, decided to destroy it, but caused Noah to build the ark. That's chapter 6. Chapter 7, the flood begins. Waters start coming down. Now the actual flood. And then 8, the waters start receding. Chapter 8, the waters go away. Noah sends out the birds. And the ark lands in this area of Mount Ararat. Remember that little lake I told you to look at a while ago? We're down here, so bottom edge. It's way up north of where we were. Northern part of above the Mesopotamia Valley. But the ark landed at Mount Ararat. People today, you read about going over trying to find the ruins of the ark. So then in chapter 9, we have those 4 or 5 things that we talked about when Tim went through it. We have meat given for food for the first time. We have the law of capital punishment, blood for blood. I didn't put it up here, but not to eat blood was one of them too. Rainbow promise, never destroy the earth again by the water. And then the sin of Noah when he got drunk, and the nakedness, Ham's looking on him, and then, of course, the curse for Canaan because of that. That's the period of the flood, Genesis 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we have some generations again in chapter. Third period then is Genesis chapter 11, one chapter. And this is the scattering of the people, the Tower of Babel, the confusion of the language. And this happened on what's called the Plains of Shinar, which is just above where we were a while ago. We looked at the possible size of the Garden of Eden. Plains of Shinar. One chapter for that whole section there, scattering of the people. Then we get into patriarchs, fourth period. These are the four we'll cover this quarter. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Patriarch simply means father rule. Eternal, see the word patriarch in there. And monarch, the word ark, father rule. And we have the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is going to cover the rest of the book of Genesis, chapter 12 through 50. The next got to know verses. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1, 2, 3, and verse 7. These are the promises. First time they were given to Abraham. Nation, land, and sea. The three promises. And we'll see those as we go through the rest of the story this morning. Nation, the land, and the sea. And these things are important because look over in Acts chapter 3, toward the very end of the chapter down there, when Peter's preaching to the Jews after the crucifixion of Christ in the Acts 2 sermon, he references, as he says, the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are being fulfilled now through Christ. That ties all this together from that standpoint. And then, of course, Jacob's name changed to Israel, his 12 sons, the 12 tribes, and children of Israel come from that. Joseph began the link. He was sold by his brothers into Egypt. They thought they were doing a bad thing to him because they hated him. God's doing it for his own purpose there. And then the famine and the family of Joseph, Jacob, and all the brothers moving down into Egypt. About 70 people moved into Egypt there. This is the time of the patriarchs. And it's the trip Abraham made. Abraham went from down this area we looked at earlier, up to Haran. His father Terah died, remember that? And he came down then into the land of Canaan, of course, the famine down to Egypt and back here. So we'll see these cities in Shechem, Bethel, Machpelah, Beersheba, all those during this quarter. Talk about those various cities there. Now, they're in Egypt. They haven't moved down there. Joseph been in charge, second in the land, and now 400 years passed. 400 years later. And a Pharaoh comes up who doesn't know Joseph, has no relationship with Joseph. People are now in bondage. They're enslaved. So that brings up the deliverance. We have Moses come on the scene as the deliverer. Well, the 10 plagues are given. Time maximum number 10. Death of the firstborn of anything in Egypt. And then the people leave. They cross over the Red Sea, travel down to Mount Sinai. On the way down, they're given manna to eat, manna for food. They complain to God. So, they're up in the land of Goshen in Egypt. They travel down to Mount Sinai. And there we have a number of things that happen at Mount Sinai. And these are 4 things, 4 really important things. The covenant with God, given the law, given the priesthood, and the tabernacle where the priests served. The special relationship with God, the law he gave them, the priesthood he set up, and the tabernacle where they served. And now the first of those 3 promises of Abraham are now fulfilled. They are now a nation. In fact, if you look at back one of the verses in Genesis, it actually says they became a nation in the land of Egypt. But now they're organized, they have the law, they have the covenant, they have the priesthood, they have the tabernacle. So the first of those 4 promises, of your descendants, I'll make a great nation, has now happened. So now from here they go up from Mount Sinai up to Kadesh Barnea. We're going to send the spies out. And here's Mount Sinai, that in the bottom part, between the 2 fingers of the Gulf there. And they go up to Kadesh Barnea, right on the southern edge of the land of Canaan. Here the spies are sent out. and they come back with a bad report, and that brings on the wandering in the wilderness. Next period, period 6. They sent us to wander a year, for each day the spies were gone. That's in Numbers chapter 14. That occurs. Lots of things happen. Lots of things happen during this period of wandering in the wilderness. In Numbers chapter 16, we have the story of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. They're rebelling against Moses, rebelling against the authority God had set up. Now they were handled. The earth opened up and swallowed them up. Chapter 20 is a big chapter. Miriam, Moses and Aaron's sister, dies here. This same chapter, we have the sin of Moses when he's told to bring forth the water from the rock. He said, "Must we bring forth the water?" That's what led to Moses not going into the land of Canaan. We have Edom. Let them go through their land. Now, who is Edom? Think about that. Edom's the descendants of Esau. Got the children of Israel, descendants of Jacob, 2 brothers, and now they're having this spat, this war type thing here. So let them go through it. And we'll look in a minute at the map and see where Edom was located. And also in this chapter 20 is where Aaron dies. Moses' brother, first high priest. Died in chapter 20. All right, moving on, chapter 21. Remember the story of the bronze serpent? The serpent's coming and eating and biting the people. Moses puts the serpent on the pole. They look at it and they live. Well, why is that important to think about? Well, in John chapter 3, verse 14, right before that famous verse 16 there, what's Christ say? Just as the serpent was raised up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. That verse. That refers back to this thing here. Numbers chapter 21. 22, we have the story of Balak and Balaam and Balak. And then in 26, all the wanderings happen. It's time to take a census again, see what's happened. All the males above 20 years old have now died, except Joshua and Caleb. So the wandering of the wilderness period is about over. That's what it was for. Those unbelieving people out. 27, Joshua is appointed to be the leader. So he's about to die. Joshua is the new leader of the people. And then in Deuteronomy 34, after Moses delivered all those speeches in the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 34, he dies on Mount Nebo, looking across the land, didn't enter it. He died there. God buries him, and they're ready to do that. So, after wandering in the wilderness, we're ready to go into the land of Canaan. Our next period is going to be invasion and conquest. So they're poised here. This is what some of these people are. This for reference here. If they came up from Mount Sinai, here's Kadesh Barnea, where the spies were sent out. They wandered down here. Here's Edom. They wouldn't let them go through the land. Here's Moab and Ammon. Who are they? Where did they come from? Lot. Okay. 2 sons born to Lot's daughters from their incest with him. Okay. So these are all people that's related to the children of Israel. They go through. So, ready for the invasion and conquest. Yeah, just across the Jordan. Ready to go across the Jordan and enter the land. So, chapter 3 of Joshua now. They cross the Jordan. Chapter 5. That circumcision put back in. We'll talk about that this quarter with Abraham and circumcision was given. They hadn't practiced it during this time. And now they started back up. The manna stops. Why? God fed them with manna during the wilderness, during the wilderness wanderings. That time's coming over. What's the land of Israel? Warm, milk, and honey. Remember those words? Don't need the manna anymore. So in chapter 6, they go in to take Jericho, march around the city. Everything looks great. Happens. Chapter 7, they go in to take Ai, a small town, nothing to it, and have major problems. So they should take Ai in chapter 8. Then in chapter 9, they make this covenant with the Gibeonites. Tricked them into this covenant. It's an important event as you start into the invasion conquest. Then, as Tim mentioned in his thing before, we have actually 3 campaigns here. They go first in and take the central part of the land, the southern part, and the northern part. So, central campaign, southern part, and the northern part. They take the land. And then the next big thing that came then is they divide the land up, 12 tribes, 2.5 on the east side, the rest on the west side of the Jordan, and Joshua 21, verse 43, the land promise is now fulfilled. We got 2 of the 3 promises to Abraham to fulfill. Been given the land. But God told Abraham when he came through, I will give you this land, your descendants. At the end of the book of Joshua, chapter 24, Joshua dies. So that's their next leader, Moses, and then Joshua. Now they need some leadership. What's it going to be? Well, we have the period of the judges. The judges are the next leaders. And there's 4 words that I use when I go through this, talk about the cycle that goes through in the judges. And they all start with R. That is, there's rebellion. People rebel against God. They don't worship idols. They don't serve Him right. So then there's a repression, oppression, or suppression. Yeah, R works better. Repression. So they bring this, the foreign country comes in, or foreign enemies come in, and they give them a hard time from slavery or whatever. And then people in that condition then say it's time to repent, turn back to God. So big raises up for the judges then to rescue them. So you have rebellion, oppression, repentance, rescue. 15 judges, actually 14. Count Abimelech as a judge. 15, which is what the comment said. 15 judges here. Some examples of those would be Gideon, his 300 men. Remember that? They went to war. He keeps cutting the number down. Jephthah, his rash promise, not his daughter. And of course, Samson, all his strength. I read a book recently about Samson. It's quite interesting reading that the details of the life of Samson. Eli and his wicked sons. The last judge was Samuel, a prophet, a priest, and a judge. And it's during this time that the people said, we want a king. A king to be like the nations around us. So Saul is going to be their king. And this period lasted about 350 years. Okay. That's the first 8 of the 17. Now we got them in the land and divide the land up. Here are the judges, kings. That leads us into the United Kingdom. 3 kings here, Saul, David, and Solomon. And now we can start putting some time frames on some of these things. The dates come into play a little bit better than what they might have in the time before this. Saul reigns from about 1040 to 1000 BC. Each of these kings are 40 years apiece. Nice and simple. So about 1040 to 1000 BC. And probably the most famous story we have about Saul is in 1 Samuel chapter 15. And he's dealing with the Amalekites, which were his ultimate downfall. So to go wipe them out, take them out totally, and he didn't do it. He had to blame the people and all this. Those stories there. So that's Saul. And the little map up there is going to show that kind of area that they were ruling over. Look at Saul's and watch the next one go to David's and next go to Solomon. It expands out as we go through the 3 kings. Saul, 1040 to 1000. Then David, the next 40 years, so 1000 to 960 BC. And lots of stories we talk about with David. Of course, David and Bathsheba comes up. But we'll concentrate and think about the preparation for the temple. He wanted to build a house for God. And God said, no, you can't. And through your son, I will build a house that will last forever. That's the 2 Samuel chapter 7. Other one's got to know passage. Even know 2 Samuel 7. That promise is given to David. They've got everything ready for the temple. See, he ended in 960. Now Solomon comes in 960. Look down the next line. In 956, when it's 4 years later, he starts building the temple. Because everything was ready. Solomon, known for his wisdom, wise, the idolatry they lived into. His downfall was that the idolatry of all those wives that he married and brought in. Let's go back and look at the maps right quick. Watch the size of the territory change. There's Saul's, David's, and Solomon. It gets bigger and bigger. They expand the territory. They're ruling over. All right, United Kingdom, summary there. 1040 to 1000 Saul, 1000 to 960 David, 960 to 920 be Solomon. So about 920, 921, we're going to have the kingdom divide. Jeroboam and Rehoboam, that's what we're going into next. But now we have the divided kingdom. And the divided kingdom, it lasted about 200 years, 921 to 721. Some of these dates we kind of ease on a little bit, make it easy to remember. 200 is nice, easy number there. Have Israel in the north. Now we got division. The division occurs just above the edge of the Dead Sea, just above Jerusalem. Across there. Israel's in the north. Jeroboam was the first king. 10 tribes in the north. He sets up calves at Dan and at Bethel. Dan way up in the north part of the country. Bethel just across in the bottom south part of the nation of Israel. One big thing about this nation of Israel, there were no good kings. None. No good kings ever reigned in Israel. All wicked. Very, very wicked. Yeah. They fell to Assyria, 721 BC. And they're never known of again as a nation. Gone and gone forever. Never be brought back to be a nation again. So when the Assyrians came in and took the nation of Israel, that's the end of them. All right, in the south then, same time, we have Rehoboam reigning. He has 2 tribes. This is the lineage of the house of David. 2 Samuel 7 comes through this. Rehoboam being Solomon's son. It comes through here. 2 tribes in the south. Rehoboam's the king. They try to follow God. Lots of wicked kings. In a minute. There are some good kings there. And in 721, when Israel fell, Hezekiah is the king that's reigning in Judah, the south. So with Israel gone, no longer a nation, here the divided kingdom is over. Now we got Judah left alone. Now for the level period. And this lasted from 721 to 586 BC, about 135 years. Now, watch the dates. They're going to be a little twisty here when we start looking at the dates. Back to 586 BC. We'll see that change up a little bit. So Judah alone, Manasseh was the most evil king in the southern kingdom. He reigned for 55 years, and it's because really of his reign that brings the ultimate downfall of the nation. What he set in place. Josiah was a good king, reigned after him 31 years. Then Jerusalem fell to the nation of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, 586. The city of Jerusalem, it actually succumbs 586 BC. So Judah alone is gone. They're going to be taken into captivity. But watch the dates. 586 when Jerusalem fell. Babylonian Empire, and here's Babylon right up here on the Euphrates River. All right, captivity, the next period. Judah's taken into Babylonian captivity. But the captivity starts in 606 BC. Jerusalem did not fall until 586 BC. So even before that, though, they are taken away captive in groups. They come in, do the raids, take away a group of people, and go back. It's going to last 70 years. 70 years from the 606 date, not from the 586 date. 70 years, prophecy there. 606 to 536. 536, they'll come back. But again, they come back in waves. They don't come back all at one time. A little confusion on the dates there. So the first captives are taken in about 605, 606 BC. This would include Daniel. We'll talk about Daniel more in a minute. But you've got to remember that the image of Daniel chapter 2 is very important. We go through the rest of it here to have a good picture of that image. Daniel chapter 2. 597, next group's taken. This would include Ezekiel. And then 586, Jerusalem finally falls, 2 Kings chapter 25, and they are taken away. So by the time it falls, 586, you've already had captives up there since 606. Now, we have 3 major prophets in this time: Daniel, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah. Let's look at them for just a minute here. Think about Daniel. Remember him with a bunch of D's. Daniel interpreted the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar, ate the king's delicacies, the dainties. Rice was one of the kings during his time. He put in a den of lions. All the deeds you can associate with Daniel there. He was taken in that first group in 606. He was in the palace of the king. He was in captivity, but he was serving in the palace of the king. Ezekiel, also a priest, was taken in the second group in 597. Here's much easier to remember it with Ezekiel. He was in exile. He was out with everyday people. He wasn't in the palace like Daniel was. He was out with the people. And he was talking to them. He was talking to them about why. Why were you taken into captivity? What happened? What caused this? And he talks about two other kingdoms falling, that would be Egypt and Edom. The E's that go with Ezekiel. Then we have Jeremiah. Jeremiah was back in Judea, in Jerusalem. He kept telling them justice is coming. It was his message over and over and over. So the letters that kind of, if you remember what happened with it. Daniel's in the palace, Ezekiel's with the people, and Jeremiah's back in Jerusalem. This is after the Babylonians, the next kingdom comes in is the Persians. This is a picture of their expanded territory out there. And after 70 years, we have the return from captivity. So in 536, the decree of Cyrus, Persian king, Ezra chapter 1, they start coming back. They come back in at least three different groups. Zerubbabel comes back first. His mission is to rebuild the temple. And remember, when it's built, it's not like Solomon. People weep because of the way the temple's built. Two reasons. One, because it is built. They're glad to see that back. But also, it's not anything like the temple that Solomon had. Temple Zerubbabel. Got the story of Esther in here, about 483 or so BC. It's in this time frame here. We have 458. Ezra comes back. His mission is to restore the worship. Zerubbabel comes back to build the temple. Ezra comes back to restore the worship. And then Nehemiah comes back, and his rebuilds the walls. Three different people, man. There are others, but those three that at least you remember. Captivity under the turning from the captivity. And this period ends, Malachi, in about 433, 432 BC. So that brings on Malachi, the last prophet in the Old Testament. That brings on the years of silence. Prophesied in Amos chapter 8, verse 11. And get across this bridge, we need to know the image of Daniel chapter 2. Babylon, the head of go, the Persians, Grecians, Alexander the Great, and the Roman Empire. And across this period when there's no biblical story to tell us about it, use that on that image there. So what's going on during the years of silence? This is kind of complicated. We don't look at it that much because it's not biblical stuff. But let's run through it right quick. 331, Persia falls. That's the second period, the Medo-Persian statute. Alexander the Great comes in next. He actually lived longer than this. This is the time he was in charge and controlled the Greek Empire. 334 to 324, short period of time. And after this, in 63 BC, Rome comes to take over Palestine. That's what's of interest to us, that impact there. About 37 BC, Herod's made king. We have the stage set to go into the New Testament. We have the four periods: the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greeks. Now the Romans are in charge. Herod's the king, and Judea. That brings us up to set the things for the New Testament start. And he actually begins building his temple. When we see about in Christ's day, about 20 BC. Then in Luke chapter 1, this period of silence is broken. When the angel appears to Zechariah, doesn't know about the words of John. Just coming rather away from Christ. Leading up to everything being set for the life of Christ. So if you look at the years of silence, it very roughly breaks down this way. 400 years. The 100 years, each of four things at this time. The Medo-Persians were in power about 100 years. Then Alexander the Great and a Greek influence is there for 100 years. He didn't prove that long, but the influence is there. Maccabean revolt, and then the Roman Empire. That kind of fills the gap between that. And now we're going to start concentrating on Palestine. So now, instead of being in northern kingdom, southern kingdom, we have three areas: Judea, Samaria, Galilee up here in the north. We'll talk about New Testament. It brings us to the life of Christ. We break it into 7 sections. For easy remembering here, 7 sections, and starts off with the years of preparation, 30 years up to the time of John's baptism when the public ministry begins. 30 years here. And then the beginning of his ministry, about 6 months here. The great Galilean ministry, when he spends a lot of time in Galilee, 18 months. Period of retirement, and he backs off and starts teaching his apostles more, 6 months. Then he closes down the ministry and winding down, getting ready for the trip to Jerusalem, 6 months. So you've got 6 months, 18, 6, 6. Like about a 3-year period of the life of Christ. With the last week, there, and the resurrection, next altar. So you can acronym, remember those. I've got mine. It's not pretty, but it works. So think about how to remember those 7 periods there. Christ. Okay, after the resurrection, exaltation, he goes back into heaven. Holy Spirit comes, and by the way, got this. Sorry, seed promise now fulfilled. 3rd promise to Abraham. Through his seed, all the nations be blessed. That is through Christ. So now, here's the early church. Acts chapter 2, first gospel sermons preached. Now we have a spiritual nation, not just the physical nation of Israel, but a spiritual nation being coming from the seed of Abraham through Christ. Church is established in Acts 2. Then it starts spreading out. Acts chapter 8, move to the Samaritans, start moving out of Jerusalem, Judea to Samaria, othermost parts of Europe. Samaritans hear the gospel in chapter 8. 10, significant because it's the first Gentile convert, Cornelius. And then 13, we start with Paul and all of his travels to journeys. Praise God. So the period of the early church. Number 6. Now leaves one more, and that's the letters to the Christians. Just one slide, real short. That is when the gospel spreads out to all the known world. And you have the letters written by Paul, Peter, James, Jude, John. These 5 plus Matthew, Mark, and Luke make it the 8th author of the New Testament. Including Hebrews. Right here. Right there. There. Yep. Much better. Now, in case you can't write as fast as I can talk, there's another handout coming out here. So I told you don't put your fingers into the book yet. So everything you should have written down now, I'm going to hand out to you. So make it nice and easy. What this is a handout that's got all these 17 periods listed out on there. It's got all the things that we just talked about being under there and a bunch of verses that go with it. It's about 4 or 5 pages long. It's a good summary, overall look at these 17 periods. That's your book. If you couldn't write, pass it out to all. So, I ask you to write them simply because the more it helps you write, the more you write, the more you learn, things like that. So. All right. Questions, comments? I left out, we should have put in. 6R? Repeat. Yeah, they repeat that same cycle over and over the judges. Yeah. That's true it is. Over and over. Anything else? Right. Something I missed we're going to talk about. Something there, some correction, something wrong. Okay. Got 4 or 5 minutes left. I'm finished. Jimmy Krause had just saying about I'm pumping sand now. I don't run out of them. There's no water unless my well. I'm pumping sand out. So I get to that point. I wind up here. For Wednesday night, read Genesis chapter 1. Actually, we won't cover much of it. I want you to think about those first 5 words, Genesis chapter 1, what they really mean. Just kind of analyze those. We're talking about them in class tonight. First 5 words are, in the beginning, God created. Think about those first 5 words. Spend some time with those next time. Start looking at Genesis chapter 1. If you look at the schedule in the front there, and just, like I said, just read chapters. They're listed out down there. There's pages in here are listed in Bob Sanders' original book. I worked off of some revisions since then. The pages may not line up. If you need one of those books and don't have one in your family somewhere, let me know. We'll get to find it. Okay. I got anything else? Yep. Thus. Right. Okay. That's why we go through this so many times. Mike's got a good point. What we're looking at here is God's plan to save man. This is all this whole thing occurred down from the very first prophecy back in Genesis 3:15. All these others we looked at, a bunch more we didn't look at. It all comes down to get Christ come, the church established, and for us. That's why we drilled it so much. To understand. I did the same thing very first one of our summer classes we had. I did this with all those kids here. I had kids come up to me after that and say, I never saw that entire. People east side teach it all the time. Used to it. So many don't. They don't understand that entire layout thing of the Bible. What sin did in Genesis 3 and what God led up to Christ coming to do for us. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks tonight in Genesis 1.